Thanks for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. It's nice to be in a country where everyone pronounces my name correctly. I just answer to Michael Doll in England, so very, very pleased that you get that right. I'm going to talk today about the UK construction market, obviously set the scene in terms of what's happening in the UK economy at the moment, so that puts in context what the UK construction market, what the challenges it faces are, what the opportunities are, and hopefully for yourselves, Irish companies perhaps looking to move over to the UK, give you an idea of what the market conditions are in the UK at the moment. Yeah. Tom's kind of given a pretty good sort of introduction as to what we do at Barbour. We cover all UK construction contracts. Traditionally we were sales leads, client and competitor monitoring. While that's still the largest part of our business, I came on board a couple of years ago and really tried to drive forward the market analysis side of our business. And as part of this, we've got a couple of key contracts with our National Statistics Agency, the ONS. We provide them with the new orders data, which is one of the two key barometers of how the sector's performing in the UK. And also we work with HM Government to provide the government and construction infrastructure pipeline, which is basically an online interactive database looking at which government contracts are coming up, the scale, duration, value of them, etc. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a background about who we are and what we do. Just to start off then, I don't know how familiar the audience is with how the UK economy has been performing. There's a lot of similarities in terms of the patterns of economic growth and decline in the UK compared to Ireland, certainly from what I've been hearing this morning from the various speakers. We had 2008 an extremely sharp decline in economic output. Obviously global recession, this was felt across the world, particularly severe within the UK in 2008, 2009. 2011-12, there's a lot of talk about whether the UK had actually had a double-dip recession. Actually, in the end, I'm not saying that this is necessarily better, the economy essentially flatlined rather than double-dipped, so neither of which are particularly desirable, but that sort of sets the background as to where the UK economy is sort of came from. Much ahead of most analysts like myself's expectations, 2013 and into 2014 has seen a real strong recovery in UK economic growth. Economy grew about 2.8%, I think that's going to be revised up to 2.9% in 2014. To put that in context, that's ahead of the long-term growth rate of the UK economy of about 2.5%. So it's been performing pretty well. There has been at the start of 2015 a bit of a slowdown. Some debate as to why that is actually the case. I would say that we've just had an election in the United Kingdom, unexpectedly delivered a majority Conservative government. But there's certainly indications that some uncertainty around that eventual outcome perhaps took some of the growth momentum out of the economy. I don't know how well you guys can see this graph, but essentially the point I'm trying to make here is that the UK economic recovery since 2007, I've put here the four main sort of sectors within the economy at the top level. It's very much been driven by the service sector. It accounts for roughly 75% of output. Construction's between 6 or 7% of GDP. I heard earlier it's traditionally about 12% of GNP in Ireland, so maybe that gives you an idea of sort of slightly and proportionally larger construction sector in Ireland compared to the UK. But anyway, it's very much been service sector driven, consumer spending driven in terms of the patterns of growth in the UK. What we have been able to or I guess one of the key positives from the UK economy has been the labour market, particularly over the last 12 months. At the height of the flat line of the economy, we were looking at an unemployment rate of about 8.5%. That has fallen precipitously, to be honest, over the last six months, and we're now down to a level of unemployment of about 5.5%. Now, when I was sort of studying economics within the UK, most commentators think that full employment's around about 4% if you're given sort of the churn and frictional nature of unemployment. So in terms of the nature of the job market in the UK, it's been a really positive sign for the economy. We also had falling inflation, so the general price level actually moved into negative territory. I think new statistics came out this morning which shows that inflation is now 0.1%, but we're kind of bobbing around about the flat level of consumer prices. Normally you would start to be a bit concerned about deflation and the negative effects of that, but again the general consensus within the UK economy is that the falling oil price, we've got a sort of supermarket price war, which means the falling food prices within the UK, this should be sort of benign, that the impacts upon the overall health of the economy should be relatively benign. Again, I'll kind of run through this. To sort of on the downside for the UK economy, essentially we have a bit of a productivity problem. Even at the sort of height of the mid-2000s, while economic growth was increasing at a significant rate, output per hour, so the productivity of our workforce was actually declining. And if you think about the strong performance of the labour market over the last 12 months, actually that's had negligible impact on the output per hour. So that's a longer-term challenge for the UK economy, but that's going to be a challenge for whoever's in power probably, over the next 10 to 15 years, because that's not the kind of thing that can be sorted out particularly quickly. Also, and I'm sure this is the same in the Republic of Ireland, this chart behind me shows the levels of business investment. Once again, 2008, 2009, you see the downward line, which is the total level investment. The stacked bars are the growth in different types of investment, of business investment should be specific there. And while the overall level of investment has started to grow as the economy started to improve, actually investment in physical property, so sort of land and capital investment in property, has been declining. So that's a real challenge, and probably sets into context what the previous graph about the nature of growth, where it's been very much based on the service sector and investment in intellectual property rather than physical property, business premises. So again, it's not all sort of great news, particularly for the construction sector. And what about the UK construction sector then? Well, this graph shows the quarterly growth rates, which is the bars on this graph, and the black line shows the overall level or value of output, rather, within the construction sector. As you can see, 2008 and 2009, we were looking at quarterly declines in growth of about 7%. Now, that's pretty severe. The construction sector, again, very much like Ireland, the downturn within the construction sector was pronounced compared to what was happening in the wider economy. So the construction sector output declined a lot. It lost a lot of employees, and I think that sort of shapes the challenge for the construction sector in the UK going forward, because as output dipped in 2008 and then again in 2012, what's happened is a lot of construction employees have left the industry and found jobs in the service sector, and that sort of caused that's a real supply side issue for the construction sector in the UK at the moment. But in 2014, and I'll come on to talk about this, the construction sector actually grew very strongly, probably grew by about 6 or 7%. So in 2014, the strength of the UK construction sector was pretty evident, albeit it is coming from a low base. We have a construction sector within the UK that's very much dominated by London and the South East. I'm sure that's not a surprise to anyone in here, but I just put this graph up here which puts the different countries and region of the UK in terms of the volume and value of output over the past 12 months. And as you can see here, London and South East clearly lead the way with sort of well over 40% of total output over the past year. This is now the Barbour ABI contract awarded activity, so not so much output or activity on the ground, but contracts actually being awarded. And as you can see, the real pickup in activity happened between 2012 and 2013, which fed through into the output figures on the previous slide in 2014. That was very much maintained last year, so we would expect the levels of growth of about 5% in output terms to continue this year. So I guess the position now in 2014 is probably going to be replicated in terms of the strong performance in 2015. Where or what type of work have we been experiencing within the UK? Where have the majority of those contracts been awarded? The recovery within construction has very much been focused on the residential sector. This has been primarily driven by London and the South East, but actually in a sort of healthily balanced growing construction industry, you would probably expect that split to be more equitable between the commercial sector, the residential sector and infrastructure. So there's a bit of an imbalance in the nature of contract award growth within the UK. But we have, and I'm not sure what the position is in Ireland, the previous coalition government put in place a number of government-backed schemes to really help liquidity for first-time buyers, which really boosted the new build market within the UK. So that's all been part of the mix. London is a really strong investment location for residential, and plus these government schemes which help boost liquidity for first-time buyers are shown through in these figures. This chart, and I'll just go into some of these sectors in more detail, and just to give you an idea here, starting from 2013, the red and grey bars are the total values each month of construction contracts awarded. The line going across is the number of residential units attached to those contracts, and as you can see, the real growth from the start of 2014, we saw some recovery in the last few months of 2013, but going into 2014, particularly looking at the residential units here, we saw a really strong uptick in the level of growth and the volume of residential units reaching contract award stage. So that sort of crystallises that earlier point of just how important the residential sector is to the construction industry more widely within the UK. Infrastructure has, well, that had a strong 2013. A general problem within the UK economy is a lack of investment in infrastructure. We do have an austerity programme within the UK. I'd very much call that austerity light when I compare, to what's kind of happened in a country like Ireland. But there is real constraints upon capital investment, which particularly hits the infrastructure sector. So that had a particularly poor year last year. We've seen a bit of an improvement to the start of 2015, which hopefully is a sign of an improving picture going forward for 2015, because the government are committed to actually investing in a major road scheme, or major series of road schemes rather, across the UK. But we've also experienced and still are experiencing contract awards for large renewable energy projects, primarily offshore wind farm type projects. So that's been quite notable from the construction contracts award figures over the past few months. The industrial sector, I'll just touch briefly on that, and I think that the point here is that had a pretty poor performance within 2014 rather, but the start of 2015 has seen a real upturn in the values of contracts being awarded, and what we take from that is there's a real shift in the nature of consumer spending within the UK. I think I read somewhere that the UK consumers actually have the highest propensity of online shopping. So that the sort of changing nature of how UK consumers are shopping is feeding through into the industrial sector in the UK, and we're seeing a lot more large warehouse type construction contracts being awarded and actually being built across the UK. So it's quite an interesting dynamic in terms of what's happening in the market. These are just some examples of the kinds of large projects that we've seen over the past 12 months within the UK. Battersea Power Station in London, sort of large former power station, very iconic building on the banks of the Thames, being redeveloped for a mixture of residential, commercial activities. I believe Sting has bought one of the apartments or put a down payment on it for about £1.5 million. I'm sure Bono must be in the mix there as well in terms of putting his name down for some. There's an example of some of the wind farm, the type renewable energy type projects that are being awarded within the UK. That's 1.4 billion off the northeast coast of Scotland. So that gives you an idea of the sort of the values attached to these large projects. The Leamouth Peninsula is just another sort of major regeneration housing scheme within London. Just reinforces the idea of how dominant both residential and London are for the UK construction sector. Christie Hospital, so sort of following on from the previous speaker, we've seen the health sector's not been as buoyant as others within construction, but we do get some large health projects within the UK. This one is quite an advanced cancer care facility in Manchester with a large £125 million contract. So, and then just finally the former BBC Television Centre, West London. That's a pretty big contract, 350 million for again a mix of commercial and residential, and high-end hotels once again focused in London. Former Scotland Yard's building within central London has been redeveloped into a 5-star, 6-star hotel, £100 million. So it's just an idea of the types of contracts that have contributed to the figures within the UK. Just wrapping up then, I've got a couple of minutes left, but essentially the outlook for construction growth within the UK is encouraging. We saw strong growth within 2014, primarily driven by the residential sector and the strength of London. I expect in 2015 that the growth within residential should spread out beyond London into places like Manchester and Birmingham. I expect to see a real increase in values of contracts there. I'd say there's some concern about the commercial sector. Like I said earlier, a healthy, balanced growth within construction, you would expect it to be more split between residential, commercial and infrastructure. So that's probably one of the key potential issues that I would highlight about the sector. And just to finish on the forecast going forward, what we expect in terms of growth in the UK construction sector, we think that it will grow about 5.5% in output terms this year. That will probably slow down to about 4.5% in the preceding years. So that is higher than average longer term growth. So overall, fairly positive message for the UK construction sector. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your time.